Hello and welcome to Lost in Science. Now, if you've tuned in expecting to hear our annual Lost in Science fiction episode in time for Halloween, I'm afraid you are going to be disappointed. However, I have put together some clips from past episodes of Lost in Science Fiction. So Chris and I talked to Andrew Lynch, who is a researcher in popular culture, and he is talking about genre fiction, including science fiction, with us. Claire is talking about Soylent Green and how some tech bro decided to make that into a real product, sort of. And Catriona will be talking about why we don't have hoverboards yet, which is very annoying. So please stay tuned.
In the history of science, novel and innovative concepts occasionally arise from sudden left-field inspiration.
Nothing shocks me. I'm a scientist.
But I'd rather be remembered for my own small contributions to science.
As a scientist, I don't want to prejudice my experiment. I'll let you know in the morning.
I am a scientist!
I think they're scientists.
I bring scientists, you bring a rock star.
Across Australia on the Community Radio Network, you are listening to Lost in Science.
So I'm taking us back to a movie that asks the question, what is the secret of Soylent Green?
Can we just say it?
Yeah.
It's people.
Okay.
Didn't wait long there, did you?
Didn't wait long. Okay, all right. Let me give you a rundown of the film Soylent Green, starring everyone's favourite gun
Rabid
lover,
NRA.
Charlton Heston. Stu's already spoiled it, but yes, more spoilers ahead. So it's 2022 and industrialisation has resulted in overpopulation, pollution and global warming due to the greenhouse effect.
This all sounds unlikely to me.
It all sounds fairly plausible to me, Chris. You're living in denial over there. Well, okay, so there are 40 million people living in New York City. And everyone is scraping by on rations produced by the Soylent Corporation. And their latest product is Soylent Green, a green wafer that contains high-energy plankton, because that's the only thing that'll grow anymore. Plankton. Apparently it's plankton. That's what they're telling them anyway.
And isn't it suggested that they were Soylent because they were using soy and lentils to begin with, but then they couldn't get them to grow anymore, so now they're onto the plankton. Yeah. Enter Charlton Heston as a hard-boiled detective on the case of a mysterious murder of a board member from this Soylent Corporation. Charlton enlists the help of an elderly detective to start investigating, and what they uncover is that Soylent Green is not made from high-energy plankton at all. In fact, there are no plankton left in the oceans. Scandal.
That's a big shock.
Yeah, it is a shock. Meanwhile, the haggard old detective finds out that Soylent Green is potentially made from human remains.
He was one day away from retirement, I'm sure.
Which
Always.
Which is the only known protein, and is so disgusted with the situation, he checks himself into an assisted death clinic.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
So isn't there's suicide booths in this film, isn't there?
So he checks himself in to this suicide. It's not a booth, it's more like a clinic.
You're thinking of Futurama.
Yeah, I am.
And they ask him a whole lot of questions about what he likes, and then he gets to trip out on imagining green forests and extinct animals and all the nature that he hasn't seen in years, and dies. Meanwhile, Charlton Heston jumps on a truck carrying all the euthanized bodies all the way to the Soylent Green factory, and he witnesses the dead bodies on a conveyor belt being turned into Soylent Green.
Including his former colleague?
Including his former colleague.
You are basically telling us the whole movie here, Claire.
At which point he screams.
Soylent Green is people.
Yeah.
Nice acting there, Stu.
Nice
right.
screaming there, Stu.
Yeah.
I'm not going to scream.
All right, so let's divide the science fact from the science fiction. You know, it's not total environmental degradation. We're not eating ourselves or each other yet.
Yep, and New York is very different to what it was in the 1970s.
Yeah.
Yes. So for some context, this film came out around the same time as Rachel Carson's Silent Spring, which kick-started the environmental movement. And it was also not long after the founding of the Environmental Protection Agency. So there was the signing of the Clean Air Act, which meant that urban air used to be a lot more polluted than it is nowadays. So, you know, it was much more of an issue back then than it is
Acid
now.
rain and stuff was like a big concern, all those kind of things.
That's right. But obviously the most fascinating part of the film is the idea of the state turning us all into cannibals, which is pretty terrifying. But if you think about the ecosystem food pyramid, you've got the primary producers on the bottom, and then you've got, then the vegetarians, and then all the way up to probably humans at the top. So it doesn't really work. So humans are warm-blooded. We maintain our body temperature by moving around. But we end up spending so much of our energy on maintaining our body temperature that very little goes into producing biomass. And we're very slow-growing and, very inefficient from an energy perspective. So we're probably a bad choice in terms of a sustainable food supply. Anyway, this whole idea of Soylent Green hasn't stopped a California startup company developing and marketing a product that they have named Soylent. This is supposed to be a total full meal supplement, so something that you're supposed to eat for breakfast, lunch and dinner as a replacement for your meals. Soylent. You just add water to this powder and then you drink it.
What colour is it?
It's like a grey green. No, it's more of a beige.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
Soylent beige.
Yeah. So its ingredients its ingredients include water, like maltodextrin, soy protein, oil, rice starch.
Does it have lentils in it?
No, it doesn't. But it does have human remains.
It does.
Okay, no, it doesn't have human remains. That was just a joke. But yeah, Soylent, it was developed by a software engineer who just wanted to drink something at his desk while he coded all day and all night.
And peed in a cup.
And he wanted to be as efficient and environmentally conscious as possible. So surely keeping the human population down is probably one of the best ways to be both efficient and sustainable at the same time. So who knows what the future holds for Soylent Beige.
across Australia on the Community Radio Network, you're listening to Lost in Science.
Science. My name is Chris, and today in the studio we have with us Andrew Lynch. Andrew is a doctoral candidate, lecturer and course coordinator in the School of Culture and Communication at the University of Melbourne, and his current research is on genre fandom and the so-called quality TV. Thanks for coming in, Andrew.
Thanks for having me.
Now, popularity, like genres like science fiction, among other genres, popularity seems to go up and down in waves.
It does.
Would you say we are in a good time for science fiction at the moment?
I think we're in a very good time. I think producers of, I suppose, popular television, especially sort of your high-end, big-budget and critically acclaimed TV, have worked out, I guess, a new way to inject sort of sci-fi elements that maybe would have been possibly looked down upon in the past, and inject them into this kind of new, supposedly, second or third golden age of television production.
I guess, I mean, one of the things that I've realised or noticed over the last few years is there's a lot of stories being told which, the basis of the stories have been around for a while, but the actual special effects have become cheap enough that you can actually tell these stories without, spending $1 billion on a TV show or on a film. And you think that's sort of part of the reason that sci-fi has come back into vogue, I guess?
Well, you can produce them now, as the popular narrative. The director will say, I've always wanted to tell this story, but I couldn't till now because the actual, I suppose, science side of visual effects wasn't up to it. But also, maybe you could have told those stories. They might just have looked a bit janky in the past and probably been relegated to, your late night movie or, maybe B movie or B television kind of profile.
Well, the science involved is kind of, does feel like they got some updated technology and updated sort of concepts, but it's still outlandish. It's still not real science. And a good example, I think, this is like, I suppose we should have given a spoiler warning.
If you are worried about spoilers for the new Discovery series, maybe go and make a cup of tea or something. Yeah. Just avoid listening for a little while.
Wait till everyone leaves the room. Yeah, so they have this new Starship Drive driven by some sort of, they call it the mycelial network. It's basically a subspace fungus, which then they navigate using a large-scale tardigrade, also known as the water bear. I mean, this is absolutely ridiculous stuff. But I mean, I guess it's trying to update with new scientific discoveries or new scientific obsessions, really, isn't it?
Well, it seems like, and they've actually made quite a something. They've made quite a bit of hay around, especially naming or sort of bringing in the sort of real life science and supposedly real life scientists behind new discoveries of fungus. The discoverer of the so-called spore drive is explicitly named after a real life scientist who also called in a quite wonderful but slightly awkward kind of Skype conversation to the live after show, which is aired on Netflix and CBS On Demand in the States.
Yeah, I don't know if people are aware of this, but there is, as you said, an after show. It's called After Trek. If you are watching this series online, you can look up After Trek as well. Is that sort of part of the new phenomenon of fan culture to have something like that? The episodes of this after show are the same length as an actual episode of the real show, so it just seems to me like it's kind of overkill in that sense.
I think for some viewers it might feel like overkill, but it's certainly trying to tap in, I think, both at the same time to that classic Trekkie or Trekker, depending upon your preferred version, but also bringing in that kind of fan knowledge or fan engagement and trying to sort of mainstream that in a sense. Literally all you have to do is not turn off your television or not, press go on the next episode, and you get all this sort of behind the scenes information that would have been, you would imagine, coming up on something like a DVD extra in the past. Yeah. But now in a streaming thing is, right on your television screen.
I guess it was a live thing, and I suppose the original concept was trying to put Twitter up on the screen, and so it doesn't quite work when you're watching the taped version of it because you're not part of the conversation then.
Yes, the hashtags feel a little bit less relevant when there's this has been previously recorded before the episode starts.
Yeah, if you watch it a week later, it's a bit dry. But this is across the board. I mean, Doctor Who's had an after show on the BBC for years since they relaunched it. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. But there's other shows like Game of Thrones, there was an after show on Game of Thrones produced in the UK, which actually had cast members from the show talking about their part in it and all that sort of thing. So I think it's sort of a bit broader than just Trek.
It is, actually. And speaking of Doctor Who, our next guest, Sarah Dollard, has, I believe, appeared on an episode of The Whovians, which was the Australian after show for Doctor Who. So, yeah, that is more like the, I suppose, after Trek version, but still, I think, shorter than it. Oh, look, changing gears slightly here, I do want to mention another sort of form of science fiction that might be out there, because the other big blockbuster phenomenon in the world today is Marvel TVs and movies. Does that count as science fiction, you think? Or has just got sci-fi elements in a fantasy framework? What is that?
Well, I think you've got to be really nitpicky if you're going to be calling that, not sci-fi, at least by any reasonable understanding of the genre. But superheroes and sci-fi are genres that have often been kind of combined or hybridized over the decades and decades that they've existed. They really
with
fit
the Marvel
well.
heroes, I believe.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of the Marvel storyline is based on, well, if you look at the comic books, certainly is based on genetic mutation. The X-Men is probably their most famous example.
Or nuclear things like with the Hulk. It's all 50s sci-fi concerns or 60s sci-fi.
Or scientific discovery. Yeah. Iron Man making out of the what little he can find in an Afghan cave, he manages to make this amazing super suit that saves his life and allows him to become the Iron Man.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things. I mean, the Doctor Strange sort of side of things is a little bit far removed from sci-fi, I think.
But it's still trying to play with the idea then of parallel worlds, which is sort of
Yeah, true. And I mean, even in Ant-Man, which is, I guess, it's pretty sci-fi, a shrinking, growing suit that can actually, I think the concept is that you can, there's a lot of space between the parts that make up an atom, and you can shrink things down into that space or something like that. But
those who can't hear, I am shaking my head.
Yeah, as a physicist, I know that you were quite bemused by the whole Ant-Man.
Yeah, they had this basically thing. Oh, well, when he somehow retains his original mass, so he can punch really hard, and they do this thing when he first shrinks down that he falls through the floor because he's still so heavy. But then he lands on a record player, and the record doesn't even skip.
And also, spoiler alert, but later in the film, someone pulls a tank out of their pocket.
Well, I think
which they'd been carrying around in their pocket and blows it up because it's actually a full-size tank. And it's like, you can't walk around with a tank in your pocket. It doesn't matter how small it is.
If you have the weight of a human shrunk down to the size of an ant, I don't think you can jump on the back of an ant and it'll still fly.
No, definitely not.
No. Anyway, I think we've got a little off, a little obsessed.
Well, all this comes nicely into the idea of believability, right? Or a sense of realism. I mean, ultimately, even your hardest of hardcore science fiction is ultimately fantastical in some way. It might be building upon ideas from real life science, but it's always using that as sort of a way to talk about, almost always a way to talk about something else, or making a world seem believable, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's definitely the case with the MCU more broadly. The sort of science-based justifications or flavor sort of comes into play to make this world seems like it has a set of understandable rules. They might not be our rules, the rules we understand, but they are maintained across supposedly this interconnected network of films and television shows.
Well, I guess that really brings us back to the whole Star Trek thing, because that has, as discussed, the science in there is kind of outlandish, but they try to make it consistent, and as a result of that, people who watch that grow up to be scientists and then work on those real things. They work on real teleporters and real, elevators. I don't know.
Phaser beams and
tricorders and
flip
stuff.
phones.
Yeah.
Oh, when we get a turbo lift, I'm going to be so excited. I think it might be worth noting as well in the after Trek program you mentioned before, there are little segments, interstitial segments, one of which lets you know, in case you didn't already know, that Star Trek has been responsible for a bunch of different real-life scientific advancements, including such things as iTunes and earpods as well, amongst more. So there's definitely this idea that new Trek wants to let you know just how important old Trek was to the world in which we find ourselves now.
Right. Well, look, Star Trek and all science fiction is very important to my world. I will say that at least. And I think to Stu's as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Andrew, for coming in and telling us all about science fiction. We'll beam you back up, I guess.
Engage.
across Australia on the Community Radio Network. You're listening to Lost in Science.
Flying cars and hoverboards, they aren't impossible, they're just completely improbable right now. Because if they were ever to become available to the everyday person, one way to build them would be using magnetic levitation and a type of material called superconductors. So essentially, superconductors expel magnetic fields, and so something weird happens when they interact with magnets. Because a magnet needs to maintain its sort of north-south magnetic field, so if you think back to like high school physics when you try and putting poles of magnets together, magnets keep that, and if you place a superconductor on the magnet, it interrupts those field lines, and the magnet sort of lifts the superconductor out of the way, kind of suspending it in the air, and there you have it, magnetic levitation, or maglev. And two of the fastest trains in the world currently use this technology, using two sets of magnets to elevate the train and propel it forward. And it's really great because you propel it forward and friction doesn't even slow it down, because friction doesn't sort of act on that. So Japan's maglev is the fastest train in the world with a speed record of 603 kilometers per hour, but that's still in production. So China actually has a maglev train in operation, clocking in at 600 kilometers per hour.
Wow. So these maglev trains, do they actually use superconductors for their operation?
Yeah, they do. Yeah.
Right. So they have some sort of like elaborate cooling mechanism, because superconductors generally only work at really cold temperatures, is my understanding.
Yeah, that's the really big catch. So one of the reasons that we have to sort of only contain this technology within the confines of train tracks as opposed to, using hoverboards and flying cars wherever we want is, as you say, the cooling system. So all superconductors need to be kept cold, and you're looking at minus 145 degrees Celsius or even colder. So the most common coolants for this are liquid helium or liquid nitrogen, because the second that the coolant is gone, the levitating superconductor just sort of drops back down onto the ground. So
not something you want to have happen to your train going 600 kilometers an hour. No.
No. So yeah, the trains are definitely keeping those tracks cool. So if we had maglev cars or hoverboards, they would all need cooling units and sort of need a regular dose of liquid helium or nitrogen. And at the moment, they're a little bit too expensive for widespread use.
You also would need tracks like a train, I guess. You couldn't just go anywhere because you need like a magnet and a superconductor working together, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the other catch, I guess. On a train track, you've got the metal and you have a track. But without a magnet in our streets, and you would essentially need to have the entire neighborhood having a magnetic floor for this to be feasible, or magnetic ground, I should say. And you'd need magnets under the streets, under the sidewalks, and even then it would be really, really difficult to drive freely without a track, because the superconductor would sort of just try and follow a definite path. And so roaming around in a hoverboard, or even something that we sort of take as so simple, like changing lanes in a car, they would all be very, very difficult in sort of this free roaming magnetic city.
That was something I was going to ask too, is so a normal train works by applying force to the tracks, and that's, the wheels push the train forward. How does a magnetic levitating train even move at all?
Well, it's a good question, and it's really something that I'm still trying to get my head around. But essentially, it's kind of being pushed forward, I guess, by the force, because essentially, if you've ever seen kind of like a superconductor on top of a magnet, it's just sort of pushed around and kind of hovers. So I guess you've sort of got this hovering thing, and once it's built up that momentum, it just goes, but not entirely sure. But the great thing is that you don't lose any energy. So a big thing when we move forward, just in general, is that we're having to combat friction. But superconductors are really great in that they have no loss of energy. So you're not losing those things at all. You're not slowing down. You need really good brakes.
Apart from air resistance, I imagine, from the
from above, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do we have actual hoverboards? The answer is, yeah, kind of. So on October 21st, so the date, but a year earlier, so 2014, a year out from that Back to the Future date, a company called Arx Pax announced that it had been working on a prototype hoverboard, and it can get maybe like an inch, so 2.5 centimeters off the ground. And they've got specially lined copper floors, and essentially it's levitating or just getting a little bit off the ground, off that copper floor, because you've got that magnetic field in the floor and they're sort of repelling each other. And then you've also got, in 2015, I'm not sure if you saw the video from Lexus where they had like a hoverboard in a skate park.
Saw that one, yeah.
Yeah, so that again was using magnets and liquid nitrogen as a superconductor, like to keep it cool enough. Yeah.
Okay. And then another company found a much easier way to do it, which is basically to simply make like a Segway and call it a hoverboard.
Yeah.
Even though it didn't actually hover.
Yes. Yeah. I'm just thinking about, like, you know, all those boards that people are going around, like Arrested Development with Job. Just, I'm hovering around.
Yeah.
Not needing to walk.
It's just branding. That's all it is.
Yeah. So, you know, maybe somewhat feasible. We can certainly do it in principle, but, you know, for the moment, it's not really feasible to get everyone on hoverboards and flying cars. And even if you wanted to get on a flying car, I think in the film they went up to like 10 meters high, 9 to 10 meters off the ground. You'd need a really, really strong magnet for something like that.
I think you'd probably also need a more powerful civil aviation authority to deal with 3 dimensions of personal vehicles. Considering how much trouble we have people moving in just 2 dimensions, I can't imagine that a 3rd dimension would make anything safer either. And that is all we have time for this week on Lost in Science. Thank you for joining us in Getting Lost. If you have any questions or suggestions for the team, get in touch with us by email. We are lostinsci@gmail.com. You can send cheap tweets to us at lostinscience1 on Twitter, or you can find us on the ubiquitous Facebook. Lost in Science is recorded at the studios of 3CR in Melbourne on the land of the Kulin Nation and is broadcast across Australia on the Community Radio Network with the assistance of the Community Broadcasting Foundation. You can find a podcast version of the show on 3cr.org.au, or you can tune in the way you did this week when we return in our usual time slot to get Lost in Science!
Thanks for listening to a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online.